we saw two ashaucha. Ashaucha of selfishness, and the other one was excellent. So there are two uncleanliness that we generally don't even realize that is within us. The first one is self-centeredness. Now, generally, when you say self-centeredness is a ashaucha, unclean, then what seems like being clean is what? Being selfless. But actually, selflessness is not really a very positive quality. Why is it not a very positive quality?
Because you first take care of yourself before taking care of others.
Excellent, right? Suppose your selflessness comes out of weakness. Weakness means you are a carpet where everybody can doormat. That's the right word. Right? Doormat, where everybody can walk all over you. Then that's not considered a healthy kind of a selflessness. So therefore, being weak is not really. If you're being weak is not considered a virtue. So please take out from your mind that, oh, I have to be selfless. At the same time, you can't afford to be only thinking about yourself. Why not?
I mean, it's just a completely pointless existence.
Exactly.
Because you're interconnected all the time.
Exactly. The fact of your interconnectedness is a fact. So what it means is that what you do affects not only your husband, your kids, your in-laws, your future generations, which you don't even yet know who's to come, who's not to come. So that means this is a fact, right? Now suppose you only think about yourself and disregard everybody else, and it is going to have impact on others, and it can have an adverse impact on others and for generations. So that means, so what you have done is, you are living in a world which is interconnected. You have created disturbance out there, and you are part of that world. You are not outside that world. So in turn, it's also, you have created disturbance within yourself, because since things are interlinked, at one point or the other, it actually can come back to you, right? So there are a lot of parents who've been very, very strict when they were young, when the kids were very young. And now they, after listening to this class, they come and say, oh my God, we were so kind of, this, 8 o'clock is a bedtime, and therefore everybody, and if you're not a little kind and compassionate and little flexible, the kids actually, as adults, become such rebellious kids. It's crazy, right? So that means so you may not see the effect of your actions at that given point in time, but it will come back to you after 10 years, 15 years, and when it actually comes back to you, you're shocked. So therefore, you can't afford to be, by creating an imbalance outside, you actually also create an imbalance within for you. So this is why this self-centeredness is not really healthy for us. So what we mean is not selflessness, but what we once, I and Namu were writing an article, and she came up with this term which I love, enlightened self-interest.
I didn't come up with it.
Yeah,
It's Adam Smith.
Okay, but
The Economist.
The Economist. So enlightened self-interest is very beautiful. Why? Because it takes into account your self-interest. You are not relegating yourself to some secondary, non-existent place. At the same time, you look at the interest of others, and you really elevate yourself a little bit, and then do what needs to be done that safeguards your interest and also others' interest. So that comes out of strength, and it comes out of expansion, right? Ability to think beyond just one's narrowly defined self-interest, which in the long run will benefit others as well as it will benefit you. So this is what is meant by removing the ashaucha of self-centeredness.
The same as inclusiveness.
Sorry, inclusiveness is a good term, yes. You are inclusive, and that inclusive doesn't put you on the side. You're also inclusive of your own and of everybody else, which is going to create a win-win situation for everyone in the long run, right? So you're not a loser. You're not like putting yourself last and then only taking care of others, because that in the long run is also not sustainable. See, every time you behave, okay, let me give you a very simple example. Suppose I do like this to Anupa. What's going to be her immediate reaction?
Defense.
Exactly. She will pull herself up. I mean, nobody's crazy to kind of say, okay, now come and, So that means this is our natural program. If you are hurt, you don't want to be hurt. It's effortless. Suppose you have thought about it and you have told yourself it's okay for people to hurt me. Is this a right way of thinking, or is it a distortion? Exactly. So you have worked yourself up to believing or convincing something which is actually against the natural behavior of others. And if you now make it into a virtue, disaster. Because if suppose you make it as a virtue, what will happen? You're in your own, the whole thought process is all convoluted and you're deep rooted in that, and nobody can actually take you out of that. But there is a natural mechanism. Over a long period of time, no matter how much you have convinced yourself, there is a mechanism in the nature which keeps giving you signal. What is that signal? Resentment. It will set in one way or the other. It's not possible for it not to set in. Now when that resentment keeps growing and growing and growing, and if your actions come out of that resentment, they are all over the place. Because your actions don't come out of what your values are and what you believe in, and well-reflected understanding of being an active, responsible participant in the world. It comes out from frustration. And every time you act out of frustration, the quality of your actions in this world is poor. So therefore, it is very important that we don't get into this self-centeredness, ashaucha of either self-centeredness, or the second one that we saw is ashaucha of self-condemnation. Okay. What is self-condemnation? What did we mean by self-condemnation? Nobody actually knowingly condemns oneself. In fact, we love ourselves, right? But we still end up beating ourselves up. What is the mechanism through which we beat ourselves up?
I'm not good enough.
So that means there is one thing called a self-talk that we have within ourselves, right? This self-condemnation takes place through your self-talk. What is a self-talk? When we live in this world, we not only deal with situations which come to us, but we create a narrative for us about what is the nature of the world, who are you, what is your position in the grand scheme of things. This is what we call our personal story. Personal story about ourselves, about the world, about your place in it. And this self-talk, either it could be nurturing or it could be destructive. What does it mean? Nurture, can you give me an example? Destructive self-talk, she said I'm not good enough, right? So just in my class yesterday, it is interesting, they are doing the revision, and while they do the revision, I told them, don't just repeat what is in the book. Narrate your life examples and use these values to see where you could change to a better position. So it's very interesting stories come up about their lives. So there is one lawyer in the class, and she was a topper and she was always first and all that. And she says that after the marriage, she decided to kind of, not work, and for last 15 years, her self-talk to herself is, I'm now worthless. And if you look at her, nobody can even tell, because she's so eloquent, seems so confident. If until she revealed this, I had no clue. Right? So that means one thing is how the world sees you and how you even present yourself to the world. The next is your talk to yourself. And if your talk to yourself is that I'm worthless, nothing, no accomplishment in the world can actually help you. So therefore, this is hard to recognize. So that is what we call destructive self-talk. Can you give me an example of a nurturing self-talk?
Suppose you make a mistake, and then you can of course tell yourself that something has happened because I brought this upon myself by making this error. Or you can tell yourself that, okay, I made this error, I learned from it, I'm going to do my best not to repeat it. All I can do is make better efforts next time. Right? Depending on how you do this.
Wonderful. So see, in Anupa's self-talk, it's nurturing. Why is it nurturing? Because she's not saying, oh, I'm great regardless of what I do. That is what we call, this is not a nurturing self-talk. It's like creating a delusion about yourself as being great. That's not called nurturing self-talk. Nurturing self-talk, because that was Rajiv's question, that suppose you're always very kind to yourself, you'll never actually learn from situations. And that's a very valid point. So what we mean by self-nurturing talk is not to talk yourself to think that you're the greatest in this world and you are the coolest, not at all like that. Take responsibility at the same time, don't put yourself down. Okay? So this is what we call nurturing self-talk. Okay? This is a very, very important thing. This will actually give you your self-esteem. Your self-talk to yourself will give you your self-worth. And your self-esteem. There are a lot of people, it's interesting. Every time I talk about these values, there are some people, it shows something about the whole way they think. Okay? So suppose they come to me with some kind of an issue, and I suppose start exploring with them, because I don't know their life as much as they know their life, right? So suppose I ask them, did you try this, did you say this, did you... So for everything that I say, they say, yeah, I did that, but it didn't work. And why? Then I ask, why didn't it work? Oh, because that person never changes. So that means in this, right, there are a lot of assumptions. What are the assumptions? Tell me. A lot of things going on here. The person who's talking may not even realize it. What are the things going on? What are the implicit assumptions which need to be looked into and corrected? Absolutely. So that means in this position, there is a very black and white understanding of the situation which is never changeable, and that is, I am right because I am doing everything right, and the other person is always wrong. This is an implicit assumption. That means you keep saying, you keep doing at the same time. What is the second assumption? You never change. Super. And the person who is wrong will never change. And is not capable of changing. And will never change and not capable of changing. Suppose this is what you are telling in your mind, I am right, the others are wrong, and others will never change and they are never capable of changing, what is going to be your mental state? If you are carrying these implicit assumptions and you have to act in this world where you are right, others are wrong, and they'll never change and they are incapable of changing, how would you feel then?
Rigid, arrogant, superior.
In fact, mixture of things, superb, right? Frustrated. See, in fact, this kind of a framework creates multiple problems. One is you're rigid. Why you're rigid? Because you have set a frame which actually is not a correct frame. In fact, if you look at the relative world, there is never going to be a time that you're absolutely right and other is absolutely wrong, because too many factors are included to bring that situation to what it is. So this itself, it gives you no flexibility to look into yourself, because you are not examining your behaviors, and it also gives you no flexibility with reference to even attempting and trying your best to do what you have to do within that relationship. So that means it makes you rigid. The second thing is you can create this whole sense of superiority without even knowing it, because you're putting yourself as a person who's always right. Right? Arrogance can come on. Arrogance can come on because now that flexibility, that malleability, the mind's availability to assess the situation is all gone. Fourth, as Anupa is saying, what frustration. Because imagine you're stuck in the world where you're right and others are wrong, and you have no way to change them, and you're stuck. Frustration. So that means this kind of a self-talk is not nurturing. Not nurturing to yourself, because it will bring all these attitudes. So therefore, this is the most common mindset when people come to me with problems. This is the most common mindset that they come with, and instead of trying to solve their problem, I have to work at changing this mindset. It's not possible with this mindset to solve any problem. So this is what we call self-condemn. In some ways, you're acting as superior. At the same time, it's all mixed. It's all, it's not a nurture. Why is it self-condemnation? Because you're thinking yourself into a non-nurturing situation. That is why. Okay? That's it. Okay, now next Ashaucha. Who will read? After that.
Jealousy.
Yeah. Ashaucha of jealousy. Namita. Yeah, okay, that whole thing of Sanskrit, okay. What it actually, okay. Do you want to go through? We didn't do this because Anupa was reading. This desire did it and I didn't do it. That whole prayer in Sanskrit. Yeah. We didn't do it, no. We didn't do it. Okay, the whole idea, who wants to read very quickly? And I want to just address it.
In Sanskrit, jealousy is called Matsarya. Matsarya is defined as Parukarsha,
Drishtava,
Jayamuna, Santapa. Dritsva, having seen, Utkarsam, the superiority of someone, Santapa, a pain or sadness, Jayamana, that is born, is Matsarya, jealousy. It is the anguish, the pain that is born on seeing another's superiority or excellence. Of all Ashaucha, jealousy is the most illegitimate of the attitudes. because even by the standards of the relative world, it is unreal. Most of the reactive attitudes which are considered assertive are based on either the pursuit of or the threat, real or imagined, to some objective that is capable of being achieved, at least theoretically. It is not so with jealousy. Jealousy is a reaction of sorrow over a lack which I conclude exists when I compare myself with some other human being who is seen as superior. This supposed superiority, if it exists at all, when examined, would always be found as partial, incomplete. Upon close examination, the one who is jealous would never be able to consider the aggregation of parts and functions that constitute the entity, the object of jealousy, totally superior. If I am jealous, I will never be jealous of all the aspects of another person, nor will anyone who is jealous of me find me totally superior. Since the endowments, skill, grace, possessions that inspire my jealousy cannot be separated from the entire entity, and since that entire entity will never totally be an object of my jealousy, there can be no real locus of jealousy for me. Jealousy has no ground at all, but at the level of the body-mind-sense complex, no one except the Lord himself seems to escape this special pain. For Jnanin, who knows the truth of himself, who therefore does not identify with the body-mind assemblage, there is no jealousy. Jnanin is not jealous because no second person exists. Thus, both the Jnanin who knows himself to be the non-dual Brahman and the Lord, who is not only the totality of the apparent but also knows the truth of himself, know no jealousy. In fact, cannot be jealous. For others, jealousy exists and operates endlessly. Seeing themselves as separate entities, they see the world as filled with countless number of other entities that will daily present opportunities, real or fancied, for self-demeaning comparative judgments, followed by the pain of matsarya. When analyzed, it becomes very clear that jealousy is unfounded and unjustified. At the most elementary level of analysis, I can see that there is no absolute ranking of entities as subject to jealousy or causing jealousy. I am jealous of some, others are jealous of me. I can also see that there is no one who is an object of absolute jealousy. When I observe people closely, I invariably find things in them I do not want. Those who are jealous of me would also reject many things associated with me. Within the relative framework, jealousy is an illegitimate protest against the nature of apparent reality itself. Jealousy, baseless as it is, nonetheless strikes at the heart of my deep dissatisfaction with myself, my desire to be different, to be full, to be complete. The undercurrent that always haunts me, the sense that I lack, the need for something to make me complete, feeds the fantasy of jealousy and gives it power to build up in my mind. When I see the illegitimacy of jealousy, my mind will be inclined to pratipaksh bhavana. If the skill or grace or accomplishment of another pierces a bar of matsarya in me, I deliberately bring this thought in mind. I am happy to see someone with such excellence. I am happy to see the happiness of this person. I admire the person. I appreciate the person. By deliberate pratipaksh bhavana, I nip the jealousy in the bud.
Will you finish this now?
Yeah, pratipaksh bhavana, a daily action. Jealousy, resentment, selfishness and self-condemnation are only few of the attitudes that can be handled by pratipaksh bhavana. Any attitude that is opposed to equanimity, accommodation, not hurting, absence of pride and similar values can be neutralized by choosing to entertain the opposite point of view. This should be done daily. Pratipaksh bhavana is a daily act for the mind, just as bathing is for the body. Pratipaksh bhavana at first may seem false. but as they are deliberately done every day, they will become real and spontaneous. A mind kept clean in this manner will be a quiet and alert mind. Such a mind is comfortable with itself, is ready to learn and to be taught.
Okay. So, jealousy. What did you understand that is? Why is it ashaucha? Why is it?
Because you're actually not addressing the real issue, which is the comparison is actually within yourself, which is your incompleteness, not the other.
Right? First, you need to understand why is it a problem, right? Now, first let's talk about why it happens, right? Then we can talk about why is it a problem. So what leads to jealousy is what he explains in the book, and what leads to jealousy is what your assessment, as Namu said, your assessment of two things. What does it? What leads to jealousy?
Is it obviously a lack that you're feeling as well, right?
Okay, exactly. Combination of two things. You see somebody else, that other person, you, in your understanding that there is something that other person's superiority. Right? And the second thing is that person's superiority
Creates like a lack.
creates like a lack in you.
You're admitting that you're inferior by being jealous.
Yeah, actually.
So now, if it creates lack in you, it creates what?
Culture.
Culture. Exactly. It creates discomfort in you. Nobody's comfortable with feeling this sense of lack. So what do we normally do to address this lack?
Go get a drink.
That actually is not so bad. Okay, go get a drink. That is actually, yeah. What do we even worse? We do much worse.
We take it out on someone else, perhaps?
Or we resent that person.
Exactly. Right? So
Instead
actually,
of admiring you.
so that exactly. You're actually exactly why it creates so many levels of distortion, right? Because deep inside you think that the person is superior, but what you now tell yourself is somehow put the person down. You put the person down because you cannot stand this,
Lacking.
the lack in you. So when you
It
put
could not
the
be a lack,
person
you just
down,
feel it. No? It may not
exactly,
be.
it may not be the lack. So that means you feel the lack, right? Suppose, right? Suppose I'm watching, once in a while I love cricket. I used to love cricket as a kid. So I once in a while watch IPL, right? Now suppose all the Kohli plays really well. Does it create any lack in me? No, right? I mean, he's super and he's losing all the games. That is okay. Bangalore is losing left, right, and center. But at the same time, suppose one player plays well, it doesn't create any lack in me. So there is no question of jealousy.
But I
Right?
create lack in another player.
Exactly. Right? So that means in order for the feeling of jealousy to come, one has to have different conditions meet when the feeling of jealousy happens. One is you see somebody's superiority, it creates a lack in you. Why does it create lack in you? Because where the person is superior, it matters to you. Right? Suppose now the thing will, Wimbledon will start and all these tennis players play really well. It won't create any lack in me. But suppose there was another aspiring player, right, who desperately wanted to go or wanted to win, then that person may be jealous. So that means that superiority that you see must have value for you. And because it has value for you, it creates lack in you. Because you don't see yourself as at that level, right? Now, the defense mechanism that happens in the brain as a result of these situations is what you need to put the person down in order to address your lack. So now, Anubhav, what are the words you use? Yeah. Right. So now that admiration, actually it's an admiration, has been totally camouflaged. So your real feelings, you don't even know what they are. But this resentment, the tendency to put the person down, all that has come, and the lack in you is brought to an artificial equilibrium without addressing it. Do you understand? This is how we cope with life. Because yes, this mechanism does make you feel a little better at that given point in time, but you have actually done nothing to sort it out. And this is how this ashaucham of jealousy will keep building. Not only it will remain, but it will keep building. Right? Now, suppose you want to sort it all out. You will have to address each of these things, right? Otherwise, there are several imbalances which are created in the brain. So you will have to address each one of them in order to have a healthy kind of a attitude and free yourself from jealousy. What are the at each level what do you do? He gives solutions at each level. In this book.
You know, finally,
Yeah, please.
all these factors on the left can be present. Sense of inadequacy,
Yes,
sense someone
sure.
better looking, richer,
Sure.
or better at cricket or whatever. And some things matter.
Right.
But I think there's a very critical issue here
Huh.
that a person views himself or herself, I'll say himself, it's
Sure.
easier. A person views himself as being a victim.
A victim.
Person feels, I deserve this also, why am I not getting it?
Okay.
Then the resentment and jealousy and all the negativity can manifest. Just a sense of inadequacy. I mean,
Okay. Great.
even in a cricket team, everybody doesn't bat as well as Kohli.
Sure. But
So
they
there
may
is
not
a
have-
sense,
Sure.
but they accept what they
yeah.
have. They see the inadequacy
Okay.
to a level, but they accept
Okay.
what they have.
Okay.
But that victimhood and resentment issues don't come up.
Okay, great. So what Raj is doing is slightly refining this, because this lack, so that means what he's saying is even within the cricket team there could be some players who are admiring Kohli rather than are jealous of Kohli, right? I mean it's very, very possible, exactly. And all of them may feel that, oh, I'm not as good as him, but that doesn't necessarily lead to jealousy. This lack, when it is further distorted in your mind in form of a feeling of a victim, or life is not treating me well, or I have this talent but somehow I don't have enough opportunities.
One is
So
not
there is
getting the applause
Oh,
for what one has
exactly
done.
what so that means this picture of lack is a little bit further inflated, right? In so many different ways. And when it is inflated in so many other different ways, then this jealousy takes place. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, exactly. That's a very valid point. That's correct, right? So just the fact of somebody being superior may not create jealousy, but it's your mental story about how you place yourself vis-a-vis somebody else, which has its own addition that will make you feel this jealousy. Okay? Now, in order to do that, now let's see, how do you address all of this?
Until you try to put yourself up and know someone is constantly pushing you down. It's like a one-upmanship, okay, I did better than you. Or there's a competition. It's like, okay, you in your mind, it's not there otherwise. But when you're doing anything in the house or whatever, it's a competition. Oh, she's doing it, so I have to do it better. So you're just adding one more into it and say, oh, I did it better.
So that's a way to deal with it?
No. This is what happens. When you see what happens as
Okay.
the self, when you see others as the self, then you will not get any jealousy. That's what the book says.
Not quite. No,
That is
not
what I
quite.
understood. in the
Not
non-duality part of
See,
it.
this non-duality is a very tricky thing, right? So you can't bring, suppose you bring everything to this non-duality, there is no question because there is no second person in this world. So what are you dealing with, right?
That is what Sparrow was understood.
Isn't that what it's saying? That's what I mean. That is like saying everybody's money is my money.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. So I mean, that understanding that all of us are manifestation of one reality, it maybe helps at a very different level. But actually, these distortions are there in your thought processes. You need to correct them. You can't just skip all of this and go to this reality. So how would you?
Resentment really comes in more when you feel like somebody in your mind unworthy.
Okay.
Has more than
What?
or is achieving,
Exactly.
and you feel like she doesn't even deserve it.
Exactly. So that means this is again a victim framework,
That
right?
is
Because
also-
I'm a victim,
That is
so
also our,
life is not treating
karma.
me
It's in
well.
our mind.
Absolutely.
It's in our mind.
Yes.
It can be both, right? It can be both.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
the opposite end.
Of that.
Either you
It's the
feel
flip side
yourself-
of what.
Yeah, it's the flip side because you feel you're deserving, or you may feel the other person is not deserving. Either.
Yeah. So exactly. But in both cases, there is a certain feeling of being a victim, right? That life is not treating you fair because that person got something who's not deserving and
Yes.
you're deserving and you're not getting it. So there is certain view of life.
There's another issue here about jealousy. It manifests itself with known people around you.
Yeah, exactly.
For example,
Yeah.
I don't play cricket now,
Sure.
so there's no way I'm going to think of
Sure.
Kohli as
Yes.
jealous of Kohli.
Right.
But if I have a classmate
Who plays better than
who
you?
has made 10 times more money
Right.
or who seems to have a happier family,
Sure.
then I might feel
Sure.
jealous.
Exactly. That's very
So known people, but you see this in a movie. You see a happy family, and you feel you don't have a happy family. You don't feel jealous. You just feel maybe you should do something. You feel inadequate, but it doesn't manifest as jealousy. But if it's a known person, then the jealousy comes out stronger.
Yeah, right. That's true. So that is that lack in you is evoked more when you look at people who you think that they are.
Because you're comparing.
Exactly,
You're
you're
comparing.
comparing, right? So there is a comparison, and comparison mostly happens within people who are close to you, right?
No, not every game. Why would you be jealous all the time if you know something?
Same thing. right?
It's the same
You
thing.
may be jealous.
No, why you don't have to be jealous. You can be happy. You can be that.
Yeah,
okay,
so
good,
that's
fine.
wonderful. So what happens, it's not like every time everybody is jealous. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is sometimes we are jealous, and what leads to jealousy are these conditions. It's not like so many times, even when your friend is doing well, you're really happy, right? So that doesn't require any changing. Sometimes it doesn't flow like that. Sometimes it gets into this. So we are only looking at the ashaucha and how to correct. It doesn't mean that all the time we are only unclean. That's not what is said, right? Suppose that jealousy sets in, then what to do? How to correct it? That's what we are looking. Okay?
So first we think, why is that a bad thing? Right?
Yeah. First, why is it a bad thing?
Why is it a bad thing?
Why is it? Why can't you just I mean, this is good. It kind of camouflages your lack, by putting the person down and having. So that's okay. Why do you think it is first unclean in the first place? Namita had an answer.
Oneness.
No. I mean, let's not take everything.
But even you're troubling yourself at the end of it. No?
Okay. Correct.
So basically, that when you feel more and more full inside,
More
you
anxiety.
start looking outward to gratify yourself. So you have to just keep filling yourself with a sense of well-being, whatever that is.
Okay. So when the jealousy does happen, we are not saying every time we are all jealous whenever anything like this happens. That's not what I'm saying. In some situations it comes out, right? So So therefore, the one thing that you need to understand is that, okay, others person's superiority, the way he addresses in the book, he looks at all of these, right? Let's see. When he says that this is a picture that you have created of other person's superiority, and what he says is what? There is no person who is absolutely superior to you in all areas of
So
life.
a particular quality in that person. which is-
Exactly. So that means now what we are trying to do is we are trying to get our thought processes as much in keeping with reality as possible. The more and more we keep our thought processes in touch with reality, the distortions automatically drop. The whole approach he has is getting your mind close to reality. Why? Because the following of values takes your mind closer to reality, then ultimately that mind gets ready for the final reality of oneness. So you need to first make your mind relatively close to reality. So therefore, you say that there is no human being who is what? Totally superior to me in every given aspect. And also, I am not inferior in this case, what? To that human being in every other aspect. So that means your mental picture of what is going on itself needs correction. That's the first thing he talks about in the book. Okay? So that is addressing this. Now, the lack in you. That is the second thing that needs to be addressed. How do you address the lack that you feel either as a result of this victim or comparison with the people who are close to you, or the fact that life is not treating you well? So there is one which is what we call kind of a factual lack. What is a factual lack? Yeah, this person is better, I suppose I come fifth in the exam. I can say, yeah, the first four did better than me because they are superior in those subject matters. That's a functional lack. That's okay, right? That you can live with. Here we are not talking about that lack. We are talking about this which happens to all of us at given point in time. Not all the time, right? So when it doesn't happen, we don't need to correct it. If it happens, we need correction, right? So how would you address this lack? Because behind this, it's not a simple lack, as Raj is pointing out. Behind this lack, there are a lot of things with reference to the worldview that I have. This needs a correction. Because if you don't correct it, it will never go.
Acceptance of
So that means,
what I am.
so that means now a victim implies that life is not treating me well. So that means that life is partial, or it is what? That exactly as Anupa said, that the good people don't get enough, and the undeserving people get a lot. This is a given way of thinking. We replace this thinking with what Vedanta view of the world, and what is that? That the universe is governed by laws which are infallible in nature. Infallible in nature means it's a very big thing. It's a big thing because the infallibility you have to see in the universe, it doesn't mean that everything is wonderful. But there is a cause and effect relationship which underlies everything that is moving in this universe. So now it's a mango season. So there is a nature, that is what we call biological laws, which will make sure that the mango seeds will give mango tree. It will not give chiku tree. This is what we call about, what we say, what it means as infallibility of the universe, because it follows. Now, not only that, mango seed will give mango tree, but an Alfonso mango seed will give only Alfonso mango. It will not give Kesar mango. This is the level of precision that exists in the universe. So that means, and that happens, even all these tsunamis and all happen. So all these people, the scientists, they study the earth activity and they are able to see when there is going to be a tension, what are the conditions which will lead to an earthquake within the sea which will give rise to tsunami. Years and years and years of research go into what are the different factors which lead to this kind of conditions. So that is what we mean by cause and effect relationship. Cause and effect relationship means there are intricate relationships in everything that happens in the universe. Suppose you're talking about human problems like environment and whatever, that also follows cause and effect relationship. So that means the long ago causes of how people chose to manufacture their things, how what disregard they had for the environment, and now this sea level rise, global warming, all of that is following a cause and effect relationship. Nothing just happens randomly, right? So suppose you understand that, that also then applies to you. You're not outside this creation. So that means whatever skill that you have, that is an outcome of what? So many different factors, so many different laws, and therefore, and within those laws, you have the capacity to create new causes. You're not stuck with the laws. So that means suppose there is a functional lack, you can deal with it by putting in your efforts, right? Or just accepting. But this victim, it has a wrong understanding. Wrong understanding of the world is not fair. This world is not fair is a very, very difficult, once you understand, if you think that the world is not fair, what is there to do now? You are stuck in this unfair world. So that means you need to correct this. The functional lack you can all deal with very, very intelligently. So these stories all, life is not treating me well, the comparison with somebody. So now, this is something that is very interesting. That when you compare yourself to somebody who is close to you and all, that is the time this jealousy has a possibility of coming out. So what we need to, the way we need to correct it is to understand little bit the human brain. Okay, so the human brain, it has a certain program, right? Now, if your thought processes are against that program, you need to correct them. What it means is there is something.
Sorry, I just want to see that last point.
Yeah.
What was the last point?
This one.
No, the one you just wrapped up on the right. What? Below. I couldn't see that. Okay.
Okay, sorry. Did you take the photo?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing you need to understand, to even understand that why is it a problem and why is it a distortion. So our brain has a certain program, and that program is an interesting program. There is something called, we have something called mirror neurons. What is the use of mirror neurons? This is,
Why you want to be heard?
exactly. So the mirror neurons is that suppose I have a backache, there is a mechanism within my brain, right? This back will give signal to the brain and the brain will recognize that I am in pain. Suppose Namrata is in pain, it's not my circuit. It is what? It's her wiring which is giving her pain. But when I look at that pain, I'm not indifferent to it. Exactly. So the function of this mirror neurons is to create what we call empathy. Do you understand? This is a natural program. And the result of this natural program is empathy. So that means when somebody is in pain, if I am not added distortion to my thinking processes, very naturally I would feel also not to the same extent, but I will feel concerned about that person, and that is the work of mirror neurons. That is opposite. Suppose somebody is happy, and if your mirror neurons are working properly without distortion, how will you feel happy? Excellent. You will be happy for them. When somebody is in pain, you feel concerned. And when somebody is happy, you are happy for them. This is our natural program, which is a result of our neurological wiring, which is through this mirror neurons. When somebody's happiness causes not happiness in you, but feeling of lack, what it has done is, what have you done to this natural flowing of the program? You have added a distortion. And that distortion happens because of your own stories, as Raj was talking about, because you are presenting a picture in your mind, or as Anupa was talking, that somehow life is not treating me well, right? That person got there because that person doesn't deserve it. I deserve it more, but I don't have it. So that particular thing is a distortion. And this distortion, which is a mental distortion, actually aborts this kind of a flow that you are happy for others. This is, if you correct this distortion, this is a natural way of behaving, because this is part of the human program. Therefore, then what will happen is, you are happy for them, right? And suppose you feel that I'm not as good as that person, but you don't need to actually even compare yourself with somebody else. You need to think about what are your goals in life. You do not need to compare, and you need to work towards your own goals. What it means is that, as he says, that the person who probably will, even who is a player and who is an aspiring cricketer and he wants to get into, and he may still not be jealous, because if he focuses on his goal and works towards his goal, then it will not lead to jealousy. Do you understand? So there are multiple ways in which you have to address this lack.
It all comes down to self-acceptance and everything, but within that, you set your own benchmarks. You set your own benchmark.
Absolutely.
And not somebody else's benchmark.
Super. And that's exactly what I'm saying. That you set, use your own goals, your own benchmark, because that's how it is, and you have to work for it. The minute you start doing it, you are removing the distortions. And as the distortions begin to reduce, you can be actually happy. That person can become actually a source of inspiration rather than jealousy. And that is what we call conversion. You convert by removing your own distortions. This is what we call smart living. Helping yourself. Not just saying, oh, I don't want to be jealous, oh, we have to be loving to everyone. That doesn't help anyone. You need to understand where it comes from, what are the different factors that lead to it, and what are the different corrections which are required in order to free you from the ashaucham of all these different things. Do you understand that? So therefore, this is what we call that if you have that functional lack that Nirmala was talking about, it's very easy. You just set your goals and then you work towards it. Then the mind moves away from comparison to a constructive engagement of working towards what you want to achieve in life. Is it clear? Okay. And the third one was what? Okay. Now, resentment. It leads to you putting the person down. So what you are doing is, this is a kind of a unthoughtful mechanism to address your lack. when you put somebody else down, you immediately you feel a little bit better. But you have to recognize that this adds one more distortion to your thinking process. You are converting your real admiration into criticism.
No, there could be, like, okay, you admire that X person for certain qualities in their life.
Yeah.
You do not admire them for certain qualities in their life, and you actually feel that those qualities are not good.
Correct.
But it may bother you that they are very full of themselves, and then they are at a certain place where they really shouldn't be. Like, obviously, in my opinion, there's no fact to this, right?
Exactly. See, it's your
So it's not like you're saying that that person is all black or all white.
No.
You recognize that there are some
Sure.
worthy qualities.
Sure.
You feel that there are certain qualities that are really not admirable, like,
Yeah.
they are very aware of their privileged position in life.
Sure.
And you don't appreciate that. But see, it's not that you're jealous, but you're happy with your interactions with that person.
See, if you are not happy with your interaction with that person, it really depends, because you can choose a little bit to, not to interact with that person,
And that's
So then,
always a choice.
yeah, and there is a certain judgment also, absolutely, right? And then, it's like too many
And it's your
factors.
views
That's
about
it,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Your-
I think if you
Which might not be
qualify
true.
by saying, with my understanding, this is how I see it.
I see it.
Absolutely, as you
It's
see.
not that that's a
Yeah,
fact of
that's a
life,
fact,
right?
exactly.
But there are some really abrasive people out there also.
That's what I
Okay?
mean.
Yeah, that's true. But this
But
value of values is not about.
You end up in jail, lucky that.
They end up in jail.
So one thing is, this value of values is not about changing others, because you really don't have much control over others.
That's the name of
It
it.
is while others may have their problems, there are things which we need to change about ourselves. And I think most of the time, if our whole focus is on this person is doing this and that person is doing this, what we don't invest in is changing ourselves. And that's why this book about value of values, how to even detect what is going on in our mind. All these things go on in all of our minds, and we don't even think about it, right? Generally, if I ask you, Devesh, what is following a value, you'll just say, oh, I don't want to lie, I don't want to cheat, I don't want to hurt, and it seems I'm fine, right? These are so much more subtle, because these are all about attitudes, a certain way of looking at the world that we have that seems to be a normal way of looking at the world. In that, there are so many distortions. And unless you recognize those distortions and unless you correct those distortions, what will happen is that your quality of participation will be poor, whether you recognize it or not. And when your quality of participation is poor, it has two costs. One is your mental conflict, either it can be frustration or anger or jealousy or self-centeredness. And at the same time, the world will also come back to you with further challenges as a result of your actions and the way you have acted. So if you want to change that within your sphere of influence, there is no other goal but to change the way we think and even begin to recognize what are the dysfunctions. Right? Otherwise, the whole thing can always go that, it's true that just as we are not at all perfect and we haven't worked it out, so many others have also not worked it out. So therefore, their behavior is going to be fraught with all these problems, obviously, and different degrees, and that's okay, because unless you work at it, it is not going to disappear. Once you understand that, then you accommodate others because you understand why they are who they are. At the same time, that doesn't give you license to be like them, right? It's for your enlightened self-interest. Is it
I
clear?
have a question.
Now, yeah, please.
Sometimes the distortion.
Yes.
Like I'm aware there's a distortion,
Yes.
but sometimes the distortion is a very
Deep, yes.
subconscious
Yes.
kind of a thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
at a level I know that
Yes.
it's a distortion,
Mm.
but my response to the situation is, it comes out as whatever. And it may be like a, you know, it's psychology, it may be like a childhood experience where you will put down your sibling or whatever. And so there are certain people who are not aware of the distortion. And they are fine with their strategy. And there are other guys who are aware of the distortion but they don't know how to get over the distortion.
Very good. Okay, I think I've addressed it, but yeah, I mean, I think the issues questions are similar. I see a certain thread in these questions. And let me give you an example. This is a very, what he says is that there are, see, last time when I talked about accommodation, I did talk about the spectrum of change, the scale of change. What did I talk about, the scale of change? What does it mean? When I talked about accommodating people and accommodating you, there is one whole now change, right? Now he is talking about change. Now there is a whole spectrum there. What is the spectrum? How does it start and where does it end?
You don't know that you need to change.
Excellent. Right?
And
So what
that
it means
means you are
is
okay, I'm
that you are
okay.
in a complete denial that you want to change. Right? You are you're totally oblivious of what guides your decisions, what are the implicit assumptions that you have. You are like just doing whatever comes. So that means you're in a complete denial. Okay, that's one possibility. What is the other possibility?
You know, but you're still
You
on the
don't
path
know
of
how.
change. You don't know
You
how to
want your
change.
food, right? So that is the third one, and that is you know that you need to change certain assumptions, certain thought patterns, and at the same time, it's not like you are totally able to follow that. So that means you know and you are trying, but it is slower than. This is
You
what
want it to be.
Devesh is explaining. You are slower than what you want to be, right? Now here is what.
You're okay, I'm okay.
Yeah, you're okay because you've actually addressed the problem and more or less solved it. So now that has become spontaneous for you, that new behavior. Here it could be one more thing,
You want
and that is,
change, but you don't know how.
yeah, that was also, okay.
That was the one.
Yeah, now here you are trying, here it is, you want to, but you, in fact, at times you are defiant with reference to some people. So for example, suppose, now that happens a lot between teenagers, suppose, that something that you want to do, suppose you want to get a good grade, it's your ambition to have good grade, but suppose your parents tell you that, oh, you have to do well, you will say, what rubbish. So that means it's what we call a defiant behavior. What is a defiant behavior? With reference to that person, I'm not willing to.
Yes, you're accepting of that you with someone, but not with someone else.
Exactly. That is what we call defiant behavior, right? Defiant behavior. If that thing comes from this, I'm not going to accept it. But otherwise, I may accept it.
And it's
So
very
that
normal.
means it's very normal, right? This is very normal.
I was looking at you. I'm leaving now.
You're leaving. See, his final note about everything is without it, he can't
ends
leave.
with
Everything ends. Starts with
Today there's been
Namaskar
only
and
one.
ends with
Yeah. Only one.
Bye, Rajiv.
Sorry.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that means that you are defiant with reference to some people, but otherwise you do recognize and probably you don't even know exactly how to help yourself. Right? Here you kind of have invested in knowing you are trying and it's slower, and here you have more or less solved this problem. This is a spectrum of change. Right? Now, there are so many people who are here in denial. They don't even recognize that they need a change. Okay? And the example that he gave, and this is something that somebody came to me and they spoke, and it's interesting. I was shocked to see what is the input, what is the thing that happens to them and how far they carry it. Okay? So the sibling, somebody came to me, so she and her sister. So her sister was absolutely brilliant, right? And she was good but not so bright. So what generally happens, I mean nowadays parents are far more aware, but when she was growing up, every time the results would come, what will happen? The other sister will be like, yeah, she's doing so well, and this one would always feel that I'm not appreciated, I'm not good, right? Now, see how the mental story builds. The mental story for a child, the first thing that starts as, my parents, what? Like the grades of that person, my sister's grades are much better. Later on, the story evolves further in the child's mind. My parents don't love me enough. Now, initially, it stays with the child, feels this lack of love and lack of appreciation with reference to parents. But if you don't correct it as you grow, and suppose you start meeting your friends, and suppose when you're a teenager, then you have boyfriend or whatever, this feeling of lack of love continues and gets transferred. This is what we call transference also. What it means is, initially it was felt with reference to parents. Later on, it gets carried forward in all relationships. Right? So that means here, then you feel my friends feel not included with your friends. Then you can feel that my boyfriend doesn't like me enough. This feeling of lack of love which is carried forward, and the person doesn't know what's going on. The person is in a complete denial because the person actually feels that it's my friends who don't love me, it's my boyfriend who doesn't love me. The person is not even aware of the fact that what is going on and what is the mental processes which are happening in my own mind. This is what we call denial. They don't even know what's happening. Okay. Now, suppose this person came to me saying that and over a period of time she was feeling this lack of love, and it was influencing her behavior with her husband and all of that, and it was really something she always felt that nobody loves me, her children. Then she was working, and then she was like her implicit assumption. This is not even conscious thing. Only when we started talking, she started seeing this pattern of how far it has carried her. So when suppose she was working, her internal message to herself was that, oh, my boss will not like me anyway. And then you create stories. Oh yeah, the whole company is all about nepotism. So I'll never get ahead. I'll not get promotion. So that means somewhere there is always that I'm not going to
try hard enough to make it work.
Exactly. So people are not going to treat me well. People are not people are not fair. I'm always going to be at a disadvantage, and nobody cares for me enough. So that means it started here, but now it has percolated every aspect of your life, but you don't even know that it is your thing which needs a certain correction. You think that it is all these people who are doing all these horrible things to you. Right? So now, what is required is the first thing that when you actually ask, see that given behavior, why do you even want to change it? Because it becomes unsustainable after a while. It creates suffering in you. So because it creates suffering in you, you want to help yourself. So you go to somebody, and that person, if that person is a little clever, will try to make you see what the root problem is, because you don't know right now. You are lost in your own thoughts about what others are and how everything is. So now suppose you understand that this is the root cause. Can you just change it overnight? It's not possible. Please understand, if you don't understand the fact that you can't change this overnight, you will give yourself such a hard time and saying that I want to change, and I'm not able to change. Please don't, and this is again a self-talk which is destructive. this pattern of thinking is too long, it is too widespread, and it has too many implied meanings that takes time to sort out. So therefore, I showed you this neuron pathways. Remember, I showed you that our brain, as a result of this feeling that nobody loves me, different situations, your neuron pathways work in a certain circuit to give you the message that things are not happening as what I deserve, because people don't like me or people don't. Now, suppose you have to change this pattern which has set over years and it has percolated so many different aspects of your life, and you want to change it overnight. It's not possible. This is why what we call this whole deliberate effort. What is a deliberate effort? You can't change everything overnight. Next time a situation happens and you give yourself the same message, you have to pause and you need to correct. You can only deal with one thing at a time which is in front of you. You can't deal with everything which is all over. It's not possible. So the first situation that arises, you need a correction. The second situation arises, you need a correction. Suppose your mind goes back to its previous pattern, because that's a very well established pattern. Don't beat yourself up. Just say that, yeah, this is how it is. It's not always easy. So second time, suppose you went back to your previous pattern, but at least now you're aware, you know it, and you know that you went off. So you tell yourself, next time I'll be more alert. That's how consistently you have to, whatever comes in front of you, your brain will give you this set pattern message. For her it was, nobody loves me, nobody likes me, nobody will treat me well. And you need to change that story. Slowly, as events occur. You can't change the whole story and everything past. As you begin to change that story, even if you go back to that old story sometime, doesn't matter. Over a period of time, this pattern will become loose and a new pattern will set in. This is what we call neuroplasticity. This is whole neurosciences. It's amazing how much they are now talking about what our values are talking about. So this is something that you have to understand, that it takes these kind of feelings, takes a long time. Because by the time you even recognize, mostly we live our life in denial. By the time you even recognize, so much of your thinking is based on that.
This can also go very deep into the subconscious.
Absolutely.
And then it's difficult for a
It's
person to
very
be
difficult.
self-aware of it.
Absolutely.
And that's what happens.
That's what happens.
Very often.
Very often.
Yeah.
And this is why a book like this brings out everything, so that we have some insight into our own self, and we even begin to recognize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And then work towards those changes.
Some people need professional help.
Some people may need professional help, absolutely. But what I feel that if you're not so damaged, then Vedanta can really help you a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, because it does address, and it goes step by step, and it just, shows you how things are.
But there's some
right?
very,
You may not do the right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are people who
The
need-
childhood experiences that may be repeated in a family, and they can go deep into the subconscious. And those are difficult to unravel.
Absolutely. Some people used to come to our teacher Swamiji, and they had at times very heavy issues, and Swamiji would say that go and see a therapist. It's very good, because this teaching is good for abnormal mind. It's perfect. They can figure it out. But if it is abnormally abnormal, it has reached a certain level which requires professional help. Yeah. And that's, please don't, there is no stigma. There is okay. I mean, it's just your thinking has become somehow distorted and you're correcting it. There is nothing wrong with it. Right? So this is what it is. So now this is the end of this chapter, a short chapter of these three things we saw: self-centeredness, then self-condemnation and jealousy. That